Hi and welcome back to the channel. I'm Sue and today I'm going to share a recipe with you, something that's really useful to use up all those tomatoes when you get an absolute glut at the end of the summer. These are actually tomatoes that have been underneath the bed in the spare room in a baker's tray that I picked that were very green, and I've left them and they're ripening, and now I need to use them. And I've made so much passata, I've made so many jars of bolognese sauce. I want to do something really different. And I want to make something that I can gift at Christmas time. I've got a tomato marmalade recipe you're just going to absolutely love. So let's get started. I'm going to take you all the way through step by step. Okay, so for the very first stage of this recipe, we need to actually take the skins off of the tomatoes. It's quite simple. You need a pan of boiling water, you need a bowl with some ice cubes in, iced water, a slotted spoon and a knife, and obviously your tomatoes. This is actually a tomato knife, which is perfect for this job. It's got a very, very fine serrated blade, which is great because we're just going to score the tomatoes. We're then going to plunge them into the boiling water, and immediately you'll see the skins will start to wrinkle. You don't need to leave them in there very long. Scoop them out, pop them into the ice water until they're cooled, and then the skins will peel off really, really easily. So I'm going to go through that process now and just show you how simple it is. Once they're done, I'm going to pop them in the bowl. That is stage one of the processing of the tomatoes then. Okay, so to start the process, you take the tomato and you score it at the bottom of the tomato. Just make a cross, not too deep, just a small cross, and then you gently lower the tomato into the hot water. Now I tend to work in batches, but don't get carried away. Don't do too many at a time, otherwise you'll find yourself in trouble. The tomatoes will get too soggy and then they'll just fall to pieces, and that makes it really, really difficult. So just a little cross, drop them in. In fact, it's probably easier just to do the little crosses and prepare your tomatoes beforehand. Everything done in just really small stages just makes it very, very easy. So I will do that, I think, before I get too carried away. I have now 5 in the pot, and that should be enough for the first batch. Okay, so once the tomatoes have been in the hot water for a moment or two, just keeping an eye on them, you can just lift and check. And if you can see the skin is already starting to peel away, that's perfect, that's what you need. Straight into the ice water. I say it's easier to work in batches, it's easier to keep an eye on it then. If you overdo them, they just get really squishy, really difficult to handle. And although it takes a little bit longer and you've got to be patient, it really is the best way to get the best results. So into the freezing cold water, that makes them really easy to handle. And then you can just pick your tomatoes out and peel the skin off, and it really is as easy as that. Can you just see how easy that tomato skin comes away? Perfect. Take the skin off, pop them in the bowl, and we need to now continue with this process, putting a few more in, then peeling these, and you'll start to get a nice little system going, and it doesn't take that long. Once you really get going, it doesn't take very long at all. So I'm going to continue doing that. I need 2 pounds of tomatoes for this recipe. I might actually make a double batch because it is a very popular recipe. It goes so beautifully with cold meats and cheese at Christmas time. It looks nice in the jar. It makes a really, really nice gift. So yeah, I'm going to do double up. So I'm looking to make about 4 pounds of tomatoes prepped. So let's keep going. Stage is just chopping the tomatoes, removing the seeds. You can use a teaspoon, makes it a little bit easier. If there's any bad bits, just cut them out and discard them. I find it just easy to have a bowl to put the seeds into. Don't worry if 1 or 2 of the seeds do end up I've not had anybody complain, but obviously you don't want too many seeds in your marmalade. It's much nicer, it's just really the flesh. So just going through the batch one at a time, cutting, deseeding. As I say, a teaspoon is quite a useful way of doing it. I just tend to use my tomato knife. Roughly chopping. Don't be too fussy about the chopping as well. Don't worry too much about it. It's not, you know, it's not that important how you cut them, because they do break down during the cooking process. So I'm just going to continue now doing that, and I'm looking for 4 pounds because I'm making a double batch, but the recipe I will put out will be for 2 pounds of tomatoes. Of course, you know, it's easy to double it up, so it's entirely up to you. Might just want to make the 2 pound recipe just to see how you get on to start with, or you might want to go and make 4, depending on how many tomatoes. If you're like me and you've got a lot to use, then, you know, double it up. While you're doing this, while you're making a mess, it's easy to just double a recipe up, isn't it, and get nice large batches done. So I'm just going to continue now. Once you've processed all your tomatoes, you're ready for the next stage, and you will need a heavy based pan, a nice deep one. You'll need a teaspoon and a half of coriander seeds, 2 lemons and 2 pounds of sugar. Now you can use the sugar with added pectin. I'm just going to use ordinary granulated sugar. This is for the 2 pound recipe. Obviously I'm going to be doubling up. I'm going to be using 2 of these. 3 teaspoons and obviously 2 bags of sugar. You need the peel from the lemon. Now I've got a really nice little gadget which I'm going to show you in a moment. You've probably seen one before, but I think it's just great. So I'm going to show you how that works in a second. So this is my little gadget, which I absolutely love. I'm sure you've all seen it before. I just think it's great. You just get nice long pieces, and I think for the marmalade it looks really, really nice. I've got a very fine grater, which is just a bit too small, and my big grater is just, you just got to be really careful you don't get down to the pith where this thing just takes the surface off. So I'm going to process all of these lemons, because I'm going to do 4 lemons because I'm doing double the amount, and then we'll move on to what's next. Okay, so now I have my lemon rind prepared. I have the juice from the lemons, and the coriander seeds are in the pestle and mortar because I'm just going to slightly crush them, not completely grind them down, just break them a little bit. So just wind the pestle and mortar around a little bit just to break some of the coriander seeds, and that just kind of releases the flavour as well. And I just love the smell of coriander seeds, so it is quite exciting. They're just smelling really nice already, even before you start to cook them. And that's really enough. I mean, I don't want to overdo it. I don't want it to be a powder. I like to have some of them whole, to be honest. It's not for everybody's taste. In fact, you don't have to put coriander seeds in this recipe if you don't want to. I just think it just adds that extra something. I've got my jars now. They're on a baking tin. Today I'm going to sterilise them by putting them actually in the oven. Sometimes I do it in boiling water, sometimes I put them in the oven. It just depends. So I'm going to pop the oven on in a minute and they will go in. But first of all, I'm going to start cooking the tomatoes in the pan and adding the sugar. So we'll go to that stage next. Okay, so the next stage is to put the tomatoes in the pan. Just very carefully. Okay, you next add the lemon juice. Seems quite a lot because remember I am doing double the quantity, so if you're doing just the 2 lemons it won't be quite as much as that. Adding the lemon rind, and now I'm going to add my 2 bags of sugar. seems like an awful lot, it always does. When you're making marmalades and you're making jams and you put the sugar in, you always think, oh my goodness, it's so much. But actually, it's fine. Because you're not going to be eating it in huge, huge quantities. You're going to be serving this with cheeses, you're going to be serving this with cold meats at Christmas time. So you're not going to be eating huge quantities of sugar. Okay, so once you've got those in the pan, put it on to heat. I'm going to give it a little bit of a stir, and I just need to slowly, very slowly bring it to the boil. And that's going to take a little while. You can see there's lots of lovely tomatoes and sugar in there. I just think tomatoes and sugar just doesn't sound right, does it? But with the lemon juice, and once it's all cooked up, trust me, this is just going to be an absolute treat. So there it is, in all its loveliness. And I've got some yellow tomatoes in there as well as red ones. I do a combination of all different types of tomatoes that I've been growing it a lot this year. There's some plum ones and some tigerellas and all sorts, moneymaker, and it's just a really nice way to use them all up at the end of the season. So I'm going to leave that now to heat up, let it slowly come to the boil, and then once we get to the boil we'll just let it simmer, and we'll do that for about 5 minutes. Starting to come towards the boil now, and I can just reach the camera over a little bit further. Just look at the colour of that, just look how beautiful that is. I'm really excited, and you can see there are pips in there. Don't worry, you've got most of them out. I mean, there were hundreds and hundreds of thousands that came out. There are a few in there, that's fine, it's okay to have a few pips. And just look at the colours, there are some lovely yellow tomatoes in there as well, just gives it a little bit of depth of colour, so quite excited about that. And as you can hear, it's nearly up to the boil. So as soon as this comes up to the boil, then I'm going to turn it down, and then I'm going to leave it to simmer for about 5 minutes. If you get any scum around the edges like you do with jam making and that type of thing, you can just spoon it off at this stage while it's simmering. So just let it come to a nice boil, turn it down to a nice simmer, and leave it for a good 5 minutes just to simmer away. Then we move on to the next stage. So once it's been simmering for around 5 minutes, I tend to put a timer on because otherwise I get distracted. Once it's had 5 minutes of a nice steady simmer, then this is the time to add your coriander seeds if you're putting them in your recipe. As I say, you don't have to put them in, it is an option. I do like it, I do think it just gives a really lovely taste. And then you just stir those in, and then pop the heat back up, and now you need to bring it to the boil. And once you've got it to the boil, you need to leave it to boil for about 30 minutes, but definitely stir it at intervals. Already the coriander seed smell is just coming out. It's just absolutely beautiful. It's going back up to the boil now, and I'm going to let that just steadily boil now, but for a good 30 minutes, just stirring at intervals. Don't take your eye off it because you don't want it to overboil and spill over onto the hob. But look at that, fabulous, and the smell is divine. It makes me really, really excited that I'm going to be able to give this to people for Christmas presents, and I just know they're going to really, really enjoy it. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that sometimes you get this, what they call a scum collecting around the edge, and you can just very, very carefully spoon it off and discard it. You quite often get this when you make jams and marmalades. and you just discard it, throw it away, spoon it off really carefully. You're never going to get all of it, but if there's a large amount, and there seems to be quite a collection in here at the moment, then I'm just going to remove some of it. Some people leave it. I think when you're doing jams and things and you put it in jars, it tends to sit on the top. So if you're making them for gifts, then it kind of looks a bit nicer if you haven't got a little like bit of scum at the top. Okay, so the tomato marmalade is boiling away now. It's absolutely fabulous. The oven's on, so I'm sterilising my jars in the oven, and they're on a baking tray. I've put the oven on for about 160, put the jars in so they heat from cold, and I'll leave them in there for about 15 minutes. The timer is set for this for 30 minutes, and I've just got to remember to stir occasionally in between, so it gives me a little bit of time to clean up the mess I've made. So the 30 minutes is up. Look at this beautiful loveliness. I get so excited. It's such a beautiful colour, and it's syrupy, and it just looks amazing. It smells amazing, and I can't wait to open a jar and eat some, to be honest. So we're going to pop it in the jars now. The jars are out of the oven. I've moved them onto a wooden board, but I'm just going to let this settle for a little bit. Just let the fruit settle, and just let the jars cool a little bit. Not cool completely, but they're very, very super hot at the moment. So I'm just going to wait a few moments, just let this settle. And actually this looks lovely, because when it sits, see, the fruit doesn't sink to the bottom. It stays very even all the way through the marmalade, and that's what I want. So I'm just going to allow it to sit there for a few moments. Just let it settle. Oh, the colour is just fantastic. And then in a minute we're going to pop it in the jars. So we're at the final stages now. Just look at the colour. Isn't that just wonderful? This is the stage you have to be super careful. It is very hot. The jars are still hot. I've got something here that I use, and this is my little secret, and I don't want you to tell anybody else. This little gadget is not a jam funnel. It's my dishwasher salt thing, but it sits perfectly on jars, so don't tell anyone. That's what I use because I don't have a proper funnel. So I always make a mess when I do this bit. Just spoon it into the jars, and hopefully you can just see the colour. It's just crazy. Look at that. Just absolutely beautiful. And you can see the lemon peel, you can see the coriander seeds, and it just looks great. Once your jar's filled, take a cloth, because it is super hot, and pop your lid on. Now, pop your lid on nice and tight, and then leave it to cool. When they're cooling, you will hear a clicking sound, because when it cools it creates a vacuum, and that vacuum then seals the jars. So once you hear this popping sound, you know that your jars are sealed, and that's a really positive sound. Once they're all done and they're all cool, just go around and touch them, and if they make a clicking sound, then use that jar first, because that one hasn't sealed properly. If it doesn't, then you know there's a nice vacuum that's been created and it's sealed, and it will keep for a very long time. So I'm going to continue filling the jars now. Always remember to label them and date them, and that's really, really important, because you think you'll remember when you made it, but trust me, when you do a lot of this type of thing, you do forget very quickly. So there wasn't quite enough to fill up that last jar. So this is something that happens that always gives me a little bit of joy. The last jar is not full. I'm going to pop the lid on. But what this means is that I don't have to wait till Christmas. It means that I can start using it straight away. Good excuse really, isn't it? Well, you know, I've got to use it because it's not a full jar. Always my favourite one. So there we are. It's really simple to make. It's just so lovely, so colourful. You've got to try it. It just uses up all of those tomatoes. And you know, like I say, I've made tomato soup, I've made passata, my freezer is bursting with tomato things. I've canned tomatoes. So this is something nice and different and something that's nice to gift at Christmas time. It tastes good, it looks beautiful. It's a really, really nice recipe. So I hope you've enjoyed it. It's been fun making actually, I've really enjoyed it. And I always, when I make this recipe, always wish I'd made more. So I hope you enjoyed that recipe, and if you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. We've got lots of lovely things coming up on Dorset Country Life, so keep watching. We'll see you soon. Take care, everyone.